Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The coyotes are howling on the ridge, and the dachshund is under his binky, which means, once again, it's time for A View from the Bunker. Welcome. This is March 3rd, 2019, and tonight we talk about Trump, who walks from the talks. Israel shoots for the moon, and minors may be close behind. Safe spaces for children, there just aren't enough of those in this world. The retail apocalypse and Israeli politics. All that and in our interview segment tonight, what could be the most important archaeological find ever. Jim Barfield and Chris Knight of the Copper Scroll Project join us tonight. Thank you for inviting us into your home wherever you are on this planet. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. And a shout out tonight as wherever you're listening tonight, we know that there are people all across this wide world. Edmund and his family in Malaysia listening tonight. Edmund, Moira, Bertrand, thank you so much for being there on the other side of the planet. And whether you're listening tonight at Spreaker.com, iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spotify.com, or just listening through the website, vftb.net, we appreciate you taking the time out to do so. At Spreaker, of course, the chat room is open, so if you'd like to weigh in and pontificate, share some thoughts about what we'll be discussing tonight, feel free to do so. If you're listening in the archives, we appreciate you doing that as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't say hello to our good friend Alan in Wisconsin, who does the best Elvis act in North America. And I say that without any bias. So thank you for joining us tonight. Again, you can subscribe to the podcast to listen in the archives via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or at vftb.net, which is the website, because we've got links to all of those places where you can subscribe and have these programs downloaded automatically to whatever device you use to listen to this audio. Of course, the easiest way to do it is just to take advantage of our free mobile app. Works with iOS devices or Google devices and downloads all the programs and the archives right to your smartphone or tablet. And we've got links to the iTunes App Store and Google Play at vftb.net. We send all the audio to YouTube at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert, Derek, by the way, in case you're wondering. And we'll keep doing that as long as we don't get shut down. Once again, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, YouTube shutting down one of the most friendly and loving people on earth. But when you're presenting a message from the Bible, the gospel message of Jesus Christ, well, to the world, that sounds like hate, I guess. On social media, you'll find us on Facebook, facebook.com/viewfromthebunker, where you can see the upcoming schedule of guests. We've got some exciting conversations on the way in the next 4 weeks or so. And you'll find us at Twitter, at viewfrombunker, or at Derek Gilbert. I use either one. I use both. I am multi-channel platform when it comes to Twitter. Also using oneway.com, which is a really nice new social media platform run by Christians, and a Christian by the name of Derek, by the way. He even spells it right. And it's a really nice cross. The platform, the interface is a nice cross between Facebook and Twitter. So I encourage you to give that a try. oneway.com, and you'll find me there. My handle there is Derek P. Gilbert. The P for Paul. Please remember the weekly Bible study that Sharon and I produce. It's the Gilbert House Fellowship. We record it every Sunday morning here in the Central American time zone. As I say, Sunday night here in America. I know it's already Monday morning for Edmund and his family there in Malaysia. So thank you again for, 14 hours difference between us? 13 or 14, I think. So about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning there in Malaysia. Anyway, we record on Sunday mornings here, our time zone, a Bible study, about 1 hour each week, and upload it to gilberthouse.org. That's gilberthouse.org. And believe it or not, after 225 studies, we're now almost all the way through the Bible. So we've got archives going all the way back to Genesis 1:1. And by the way, there's a free mobile app for the Gilbert House Fellowship as well, which also works on iOS and Android devices. So you can download that from gilberthouse.org and have access to the archives going all the way back to Genesis 1:1. A couple of sharp-eared listeners picked up on a couple of things that I missed when we migrated servers a couple of, a year and a half ago? Well, I finally got around to the missing study, which was, I forget, number 61 or something like that, and that's now included in the archives. And the listener who pointed out that we had somehow missed Deuteronomy chapter 9 early on, we fixed that. So that's back in there now. So anyway, we're in the book of Nehemiah, and we've only got a couple weeks left to go. We will probably finish the Bible before we head to Dallas for the Hear the Watchman conference. We'll talk about that before the end of the program tonight. Coming up in our interview segment tonight, again, we'll talk to Jim Barfield and his colleague Chris Knight from the Copper Scroll Project. We'll talk about the mysterious and somewhat controversial Copper Scroll and what it may point to, and how you can get a tour of Qumran, by the way. Jim Barfield has very graciously agreed to meet us at Qumran when our tour of Israel goes there in May, and we've still got some room on the second bus, so we'll talk about that before the end of the program tonight, too. The big news this week, of course, was the summit that wasn't. Donald Trump, early in the week, went to Hanoi to sit down with Kim Jong-un. And even though they had planned a signing ceremony, which was interesting because they really hadn't decided on what they were going to sign, they walked away. Donald Trump walked away less than a day after getting there. It became clear that Kim Jong-un was going to push for something that Trump was not going to agree to, which was a total suspension, I guess, of the economic sanctions that have really crippled North Korea's economy before he agreed to shut down his nuclear program. And President Trump, to his credit, said, "Nah, we're not interested. We'll walk." Now, he caught some criticism for that, but great googly moogly. Aren't we sick and tired of American politicians? You can hear Sam in the background there. He's expressing his disapproval. It's a live studio audience tonight, by the way. Sam Dachshund has decided that he likes the bed in here now in the evenings, in my studio or man cave, whatever. I like to call it a study because it sounds, more impressive. But Sam has been here the last couple of weeks. And tonight he's a little restless. So if we have an unplanned break during the program to let the dachshund out, we'll just give you early warning that may happen at some point over the next 2 hours. Anyway, aren't we sick and tired of American politicians who will make deals with other governments just so they can come back and wave a signed piece of paper that really doesn't change anything, or in fact may make things worse? I mean, governments in places where they don't elect leaders, at least not fairly, every few years, understand that they can wait out whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office in any given term, because in the interest of getting reelected or getting his party reelected in Congress during a midterm election, presidents will often make deals just for the sake of making a deal. And Donald Trump apparently not willing to do that. That was something that our friend Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis was warning about heading into the summit, that we've got some leverage on North Korea that the president shouldn't be too eager to get rid of. Not only the economic sanctions, of course, but the presence of more than 20,000 American soldiers in South Korea. I mean, Kim of North Korea wants to end the Korean War officially, but he also wants to be able to sell stuff into American markets, and he would like our soldiers gone. And the president's like, nope, not going to do it. The other thing, of course, to remember is that Kim Jong-un is really President Xi's junkyard dog. President Xi of China has got a vested interest in dragging out these talks as long as possible, because it's useful leverage for him on the administration in Washington, D.C. So if he can keep this dragging out, he applies some political pressure on President Trump. And thankfully, President Trump is the first president we've had in a while who appears to be immune to what other people think of him. And that can be really useful when you're sitting down at a negotiating table. So we will see what happens there. Elsewhere in Asia, a story that, I don't know, as I listen to talk radio, which I kind of have to just to find out what the pundits are discussing, so I can comment on the commentators. You just hear an awful lot of talk back and forth about what's going on inside Washington, D.C. We Americans really don't pay enough attention to what's going on around the world. And this week, India and Pakistan started shooting at each other again. Now, that's kind of a big deal because both of those nations possess nuclear weapons. And Pakistan, which can't match up to India, as I understand it, militarily, they don't have the manpower to match up against India toe-to-toe, but that makes it dangerous because they might be tempted to use a tactical nuclear warhead if things start going badly. Well, so far the shooting is just over that disputed area, Kashmir, and hopefully cooler heads will prevail. I mean, we pray that cooler heads will prevail because if it gets serious there, it could spread. India shares a border with China, which also possesses nuclear weapons. Now, being a democracy or a representative republic, India also has to be concerned with the electorate. So the politicians, Prime Minister Modi, has got an election coming up. And so he may be taking steps that are intended to play for the home crowd rather than to calm things down. Earlier in the week, it looked as though things were going to settle down, but now they're shelling each other across this disputed border in Kashmir again. It started with India striking a terrorist camp inside Pakistan's borders. Now, these two nations have a long history of animosity. They fought a war back in 1971. Many of us don't even remember it. I'm old enough to remember it, but I wasn't really old enough to be paying attention at the time. I don't really remember what happened. But the tit-for-tat strikes across the border, because Pakistan then shot down a couple of Indian planes. There was some question whether it was one Indian warplane or two. They did capture one Indian pilot who was returned this week. And after they returned the fighter pilot, then the shooting started again, overnight Friday into Saturday morning. So artillery fire, which caused some civilian and military casualties, continuing through the weekend. And again, how much of this is really tactical? You know, what is the purpose of this? One side or the other actually going to try to seize this disputed area in the Himalayas? Or are they doing it just to put on a show for the home crowd, the voters, leading up to an election? We don't know, but pray that India and Pakistan kind of cool things down. Because again, when you got two nuclear-armed nations shooting at one another, it's, something that keeps government officials elsewhere kind of awake at night. Mentioned in the opening tonight, safe spaces for children, and not enough safe spaces for children in this world. This is an ongoing story that doesn't get enough attention, really, in the major media. Occasionally something will break through, and we'll see something about, pedophile ring busted or human trafficking ring busted, but there's not enough of that because, sadly, a lot of these perpetrators or alleged perpetrators are well connected politically. Now, here in the U.S., again, because we Americans don't pay enough attention to what goes on around the world, most of us have not heard about the Rotherham sex trafficking scandal and others like it out of the U.K. But there was another story that came up this past week, connected, sort of, to what went on in Rotherham, England between, from the early 70s until about the early 2000s. A peer, member of the House of Lords, Lord Ahmed of Rotherham, age 61, charged with indecent assault of a boy under the age of 13. Prosecutors claim that this took place in the early 1970s when Lord Ahmed would have been between the ages of 14 and 17. He's also charged with 2 accounts of attempting to rape a girl. Now, why did I pick up on this story? Because he's from Rotherham, which is the site of this story that was blown up in the media, finally, after years of being ignored. A child sexual abuse ring that operated in Rotherham, which is in South Yorkshire, from the late 80s until the 2010s. Local authorities apparently knew about this for quite some time, but were afraid of being accused of racism, and so they just kind of kept a lid on it. Finally, in the early 90s, care home managers began investigating reports that some of the children in their care were being picked up by taxi drivers. The first conviction took place in 2010, and bear in mind that this had been going on at that point for almost 30 years. And this is where Lord Ahmed is from, and where the area that he represents in the House of Lords. Two other men, Mohammed Farouk, age 68, Mohammed Tariq, age 63, both from Rotherham, also charged. They'll appear in Sheffield Magistrates Court in mid-March. I kind of touch on the Rotherham scandal and others like it in my forthcoming book called Bad Moon Rising, but the tragedy here is that children who should have been protected, not only by parents, but by the council in Rotherham, and this is not the only site in the UK where this has taken place. There are other places in the UK where similar scandals have taken place, where it appears that authorities, government authorities, knew about it and were afraid to do anything about it because most of the perpetrators, or alleged perpetrators, were Pakistanis, Muslims, and most of the victims were Anglo. But this is not confined to the UK. Stories like this all around the planet. We're familiar with the stories of the pedophile priests. The Vatican recently held a conference to try to address the issue, or at least give the appearance of addressing the issue, because there's some accusations that Pope Francis was aware of some of the alleged perpetrators, aware of the accusations made against them, and covered up or protected some of those who'd been accused. Here in the U.S. this past week, a member who was a bishop in the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, arrested by a vice squad after a human trafficking sting. Represented a church in Lehi, Utah. 51-year-old David Moss contacted women that he thought were prostitutes on the internet or via social media, said that he could manage them, which is different, he said, from being a pimp. It's not quite the same thing, he claims. Again, at the time of his arrest, serving as bishop for a congregation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What makes this especially despicable, and the pedophile priest scandal and other child abuse scandals involving members of the clergy. We talked a few weeks ago about a similar scandal that had come to light in the Southern Baptist Convention, is that members especially members of a church that professes to believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, would abuse that position of trust to abuse children. Now, in the context of the long spiritual war in which we are all deployed, it shouldn't surprise us that the enemy, by which I mean the principalities and powers, cosmic rulers of this present darkness, Ephesians 6, would try to infiltrate the church and destroy it from within in that way. By destroying children when they're young and destroying the trust that children have, especially in those who profess to be pastors and teachers of the gospel. In the case of the Southern Baptists, I mean no disrespect to anyone who's a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, but that is a different Jesus that the LDS worships. Anyway, it is despicable, but that speaks to the nature of the enemy that we face in this supernatural war, the principalities and powers. There needs to be more safe space for children. One fellow who's kind of infamous, who cut a deal years back, could have spent life in prison, but got out after 13 months in a private wing of a county jail. Jeffrey Epstein, money manager for the rich and famous, owned his own island in the Caribbean, cut a deal back in, when was this, 2004? Had a team of powerful lawyers, which included Alan Dershowitz and Kenneth Starr who investigated Bill Clinton back in the day, cut a deal and went easy on him, despite allegations of sexual abuse of underage girls that could have put him away for life. He was accused of sexually abusing dozens of underage girls in Palm Beach between 2001 and 2006. But he got 13 months at a private wing in a county jail. And the deal was signed by Alexander Acosta, who was then the U.S. Attorney for Miami. He is now President Trump's Secretary of Labor. Well, a federal judge a week ago Thursday ruled that Acosta's team broke the law by concealing the agreement from more than 30 girls who said that they'd been abused by Epstein. Epstein, who flew, what did they call the plane? The Lolita Express. And flew powerful friends down to his island where things allegedly occurred. Among his friends, Bill Clinton. Donald Trump apparently was a friend of his. Kevin Spacey, comedian Chris Tucker, and others. Doesn't mean that these guys did anything with Epstein that they shouldn't have, but that just shows the kind of circles that Epstein moved in. And, again, children who should not have been in a position to be abused. Not only abused, but then he avoided the punishment he should have suffered by cutting a deal. At least here in our state of Missouri, hopefully taking a step towards making mother's womb a safe space for children. The House of Missouri, or the Missouri House of Representatives, rather, on Wednesday passed a bill, but that's been called the strongest pro-life bill in the country. The bill actually includes the language, God is the author of life. House Bill 126. It passed by a vote of 117 to 39. 117 to 39. That's a 3-to-1 margin, which means bipartisan support. It goes to the Senate here in Jefferson City now. The Senate also has a Republican majority, so it will likely pass. Governor Mike Parson here supports it. It will likely pass. The bill has multiple provisions related to abortion, a ban on abortion when there's a heartbeat and when the unborn baby can feel pain. But again, unique in that it mentions God, credits God as the author of life. It's a good step forward. And we say kudos to our representatives in Jefferson City for passing it. The retail apocalypse continues here, even though the economy, at least if you use the stock market as a guide, has been booming here in the United States for the last couple of years. This past week, Main Street not doing quite as well. Just remember, for all of the connection there is between the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the real economy, those guys on Wall Street might as well be trading baseball cards back and forth. More than 300 store closures announced toward the end of this past week. Announced within the span of 24 hours. Gap, JCPenney, Victoria's Secret, basically mall stores just dying. I mean, we don't really go to malls anymore, most of us. Most of these things that we used to go to the mall to buy, we can now buy over the internet. Amazon's doing great. Even Walmart, which revolutionized retail shopping, when you had to go to a store to get something, even Walmart is struggling because of Dollar General. I mean, you can only put so many Walmarts per square mile. You got to have some space between them because they're so big that in order to pay for the square footage, you really need to space them out. And most of us were going to Dollar General, or buying things at Dollar General we used to go to Walmart to get. But because Dollar General is so much smaller, I mean, the little county seat 5 miles from us, population 440, it's got a Dollar General. The town where we go to work, population 1,400, that's got a Dollar General. You're not going to find a Walmart, 24-hour Walmart in either one of those places. But you can go to those stores and get all the stock up, the real basic items that you need. Save the trip to Walmart for when you need to buy tires or something. So anyway, Gap, JCPenney, Victoria's Secret announced 300 store closings in 24 hours. Tesla Motors announced it's going to close most of its 378 dealerships around the country. It's moving to online-only sales. You buy your Tesla online. How's that virtual test drive working for you? And again, Walmart still not doing well. In order to cut costs, they're eliminating store greeters, and they're going to replace overnight shifts with robots, labor-saving machines. Israel's first moon landing is back on track. It had a glitch earlier this week. The Bereshit lander, which means Genesis, in the beginning, is supposed to move into lunar orbit on April 4th and touch down on the lunar surface on April 11th. It's carrying a library on tiny disk drives. Well, not drives, but tiny disks. It's like a backup of Earth. A 30 million page archive of human knowledge etched into a DVD-size metal disc. Who is going to read this someday, and for what purpose, we don't know. Sounds like the plot to a Star Trek movie. But anyway, Israel's first lunar lander back on track. It's had a software glitch earlier in the week, but its engine finally fired, and now it's back on course. Miners, by the way, looking at the moon, hoping to pull enough minerals out of the moon to make it, pay for, leaching off the Earth for the last 5 billion years, or, however old you think it is. European scientists say they plan to start mining the moon as early as year 2025. The goal is to mine waste-free nuclear energy. We want to place a lander on the lunar surface to mine and process the rock there for useful materials such as water, oxygen, and an isotope called helium-3, which might be useful for future fusion reactors. If it works, kind of cool. We shall see. In Israel, we're finding out that Israeli politics is just as nasty as American politics. Attorney General Avichai Mendelblit, did I say that right? I think so. Announced that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been informed through his attorney that he's going to be indicted on charges of bribery and breach of trust. Bear in mind that it's just 6 weeks before an election in Israel. Any connection? Yeah, I think so. So, Netanyahu called the prosecution's announcement outrageous and an unprecedented witch hunt carried out by his liberal opponents. Again, nothing really different there compared to what's going on here in the United States. On the ground there, Israeli aircraft struck a Hamas post in Gaza. There had been some bombs tossed at the border fence from positions inside Gaza earlier. IDF planes hitting a Hamas position in northern Gaza. It's ongoing, it seems. And one final note, speaking of Israel, we mentioned last week the plague of locusts spreading alongside the Red Sea, both sides of the Red Sea. Began in Eritrea and Sudan, crossed the Red Sea over into Saudi Arabia, and moving northward due to heavier than normal rainfall in Sudan and Eritrea, and heading towards Israel. But the Israelis are saying, well, hey, it means it's just in time for the Passover Seder, and locusts make apparently a great snack for the Seder. So, Rabbi Natan Sifkin, who's director of the Biblical Museum of Natural History, holds an annual banquet which features locusts dipped in chocolate and caramel. I don't know that the recipe was handed down from John the Baptizer, but it's possible. Not likely, but possible. Anyway, Passover this year coming in April. Friday, April 19th is when it begins, and apparently the locust swarms will be there in time. But instead of a man bites dog story, I guess man bites locust story. Well, coming up, we're going to talk about Israel and one of the most, should we say, controversial but exciting discoveries of the last century. And this is the Copper Scroll. What does it point to? What does it mean for end times prophecy? the director of the Copper Scroll Project, and his colleague, Jim Barfield and Chris Knight. Join us straight ahead. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.
For thousands of years, the world has heard warning that there is a coming day when the man of sin, the Antichrist, will arise to pilot the greatest deception in human history. Prepare yourself now for what is ahead with the coming Third Temple Collection. This incredible assortment features Dr. Thomas Horn's new book, The Rabbis, Donald Trump, and the Top Secret Plan to Build the Third Temple, where you'll learn why many believe President Trump is a King Cyrus-like figure, guided by Hashem, God himself. The connection between Donald Trump, rabbis, and a behind-the-scenes scheme to erect the Third Temple. And how this, as the book of Daniel prophesied, will be the catalyst that precedes the apocalypse and arrival of Antichrist. All this and so much more. This unbelievable collection also includes best-selling author Carl Gallups' brand new book, The Rabbi, The Secret Message, and the Identity of Messiah, which reveals how Israel's most venerated Orthodox rabbi, Yitzhak Kaduri, came face-to-face with the true Messiah and said that it was Jesus Christ. You may know that much of the story, but now you can learn what's happened since. Discover the secrets, witness tampering, intimidation tactics, global media, and powerful personalities who will stop at nothing, including death threats and even ritualistic curses to cover up this new stunning revelation. But we're just getting started. The coming Third Temple Collection also includes Shelley Neese's new book, The Copper Scroll Project, that highlights the decades-long quest to uncover Qumran's greatest secrets, the lost treasures of the Jerusalem Temple. Hold on to your hats as you'll also discover how the Dead Sea Scrolls were merely the tip of the archaeological iceberg as Jim Barfield's Copper Scroll Project tethers to Israel's modern battle for the Temple Mount, and how the secrets contained in the Copper Scroll, the most enigmatic of the Dead Sea Scrolls, might hold the key to one of the greatest treasures in Israel's history. But that's not all. You'll also receive the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America, Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. Also included in this amazing collection, the original 4-week investigative SkyWatch television series regarding the coming Third Temple on DVD, featuring Carl Gallups, Shelley Neese, and Dr. Thomas Horn. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $180. Yours now for your donation of only $30 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to save big. The coming Third Temple Collection, available now at SkyWatch TV Store. Order online or call 844-750-4985.
Talking the walk every Sunday night. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Coming up in our final segment tonight, a church in Africa backtracks on a miracle. We'll explain. Basically, they're saying now, well, okay, he wasn't all the way dead. That'll be after 8:30 Central Time tonight. We got more important things to talk about right now. Our discussion of what could be the most important archaeological find in history. An award-winning arson investigator turned investigator of timeless treasures. He's the founder and director of the Copper Scroll Project, and with him his colleague tonight. We welcome to the program first, Jim Barfield. Jim, good to talk with you again, brother.
Well, it's great to be here with you guys, and I really appreciate the time to be able to visit with you.
And with him, his colleague in the Copper Scroll Project, which you'll find online at copperscrollproject.com if you want to learn more, Chris Knight. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. I look forward to sharing tonight.
Well, this is a fascinating subject, and I've got to confess, the first time I heard about it, we had some folks that got in touch with us at SkyWatch TV maybe last year at some point, said, have you heard about this copper scroll and what it's about? And the first time I heard it and did a little not really sufficient in-depth investigation of it, it seemed to me like an internet conspiracy theory because it sounds too fantastic to possibly be true. Now, Jim, you're a serious arson investigator, firefighter turned arson investigator, award-winning arson investigator who had to follow the evidence where it led. What is the copper scroll, first of all, and then what about it convinced you that this is legit?
Well, the copper scroll is exactly what the name implies. It's a copper document. It's hammered metal, copper, and it's hammered about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little less. It's thin, but it's not really thin. And what they did is they pressed or tapped the Hebrew words into it, and it's actually a verbal map describing the locations of about 57 hoards of treasure buried in the land of Israel. And they're not just treasure. They're way, way more than that. They're artifacts and temple vessels. And I absolutely believe they're vessels and artifacts from the time of the first temple.
So now this is something that scholars have been arguing about for half a century. And, a lot of them are not really convinced that this could possibly be true for a variety of reasons. Again, what is it about the copper scroll that led you to believe, there's something to this thing?
Well, the biggest thing is there are other documents that talk about the copper scroll. They actually speak of it. They tell what the items that they buried. The stories are not all identical, but they're very, very similar. They mentioned the names of the people that actually wrote this copper scroll. So what I did is I applied the same techniques I'd use on an investigation. I would collect the data, collect the information, all the witnesses, and what I did that archaeologists, and I'm not speaking against them at all, I just use a very different technique, an investigative technique that apparently the archaeologists and the scholars don't use. I listen to everybody. If there's a child that's telling me, Mr. Fireman, the building was on fire over here at first, and I saw this old man run away, I listen to him. Because actually children are really good witnesses because they don't know to apply their knowledge. They have no knowledge of that kind of stuff. So they just tell you what they see. Where adults, they're going to tell you and they're going to give you their analytical advice. And you really don't want that. I mean, you listen to them, of course. That's what I did, as I applied simple logic and analytical, we use in investigation to determine what this copper scroll said. And as I went along and I began to realize that I was beginning to understand it, it's the evidence of the research that is the most compelling and the most interesting and the most there's where I really put my weight on it, because that's the most important information, to know that the copper scroll is real. Because all of the locations we've identified are matched on the copper scroll.
Now, Chris, let's bring you in here. How did you get associated here with Jim, and what was it about the copper scroll that attracted your attention?
Well, I've known Jim since 2003. We had actually met at a Feast of Sukkot at Lake Murray in Oklahoma, and we'd known each other 3 years before he ever made the discovery, and it was in 2006. I was camping with Jim at Sukkot. That year, he was going to meet Vendel Jones, and it was a month after camping that month that Jim in December began to decipher the copper scroll. He sat down for a moment, thought, what the heck, I'll take a look. He was already he loved the Dead Sea Scrolls anyway. He was already, one of the things Jim and I like to do is sit down and dig into the scriptures. And the way I got involved was after he started making some connections with the copper scroll, he called me. And it just so happens a night or two before, I was reading in Jeremiah about the scrolls that Baruch had written and hidden. And I was reading, and I was really fascinated by it, and I read it before, but I began to pray and ask God, where are these scrolls? Are they still able to be found? And Jim calls me a couple days later and says, Chris, I need to share something with you. And I said, yeah, what's going on, Jim? And he said, well, I think I figured out the copper scrolls. And I said, well, that's great, Jim. What's the copper scrolls? Because at that time, I didn't know anything about the copper scrolls. I knew about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so we began to chat a little bit. And I said, it's interesting because I was just praying over these Jeremiah scrolls last night, and there's sometimes when you pray, you just pray, and there's sometimes you pray and you feel like there's something going on. And so that really intrigued his interest. And he went to his first trip to Israel with Lori to confirm his research, to actually get, boots on the ground and go out there and see if things were lining up. And it's when he came back that he realized he was onto something. And that's when Jim began to form a team, and he called me and he said, Chris, I'd really like you to be a part of this. And I said, well, Jim, we need to take about a week and pray, and we did. And at the end of the week, I just knew that I was called to this with him, and there's a dream involved in there, but I'm not going to go into all that right now, and I can share that at another time. And from that day forward, since 2007, I've been traveling back and forth with Jim. The first year, we went over there 6 times, I think, in 1 year, just setting up all the meetings and doing the initial research and meeting the IAA. And from then on, it's just, we've been going ever since.
The IAA, the Israel Antiquities Authority?
Yeah, we met with them first, and it's through them that Shuka Dorfman was looking at the research at the Rockefeller Museum, and there's that famous picture where the book is unfolded, and Yuval Peleg's looking at it. He gets us in touch with the ADCA later on, which is actually who's over that territory because it's in the West Bank.
So now, what's your background, Chris? What expertise, what skills do you bring to the project?
Well, I don't have any set skills that just kind of set me apart like Jim, an investigator or anything like that you would just think, wow, okay, that makes sense. He's a natural fit. Sometimes I wonder, why God called me to the project. But, my skills is a lot of it's in customer service. I owned a tractor business for many years, and that's where I serve Jim a lot, is in the serving part. The other part is the investigative part. Jim and I love to do research. We love to study the scriptures. We've sat many, many nights and bantered back and forth. And I think it's just that same passion for truth and God's scripture as far as what's going on. We both have a real passion for the Jews. We have a real passion for Hebrew and for the time of the redemption and the restoration of these things. And I think it's just that natural relationship that brought us together in preparation for this journey.
Yeah, sometimes it's funny how just you don't feel like you're really qualified to be in a position you're in. I feel that way with the books that I've written, but that's a whole other story. So Jim, what you mentioned some of the things that you suspect the Copper Scroll may be pointing to. Specifically, why would they have been buried? When would they have been buried? And again, what kind of artifacts are we talking about here?
We're talking about artifacts from the first temple. Most of your archaeologists and scholars are going to argue with me, but I don't care. But I am. Neither one of us are qualified for what we're doing. To be honest with you, Chris, I wanted him on board because of his incredible prayer warrior that he was, and I knew that I was going to need one because of what we're talking about right now. The items that are identified on the Copper Scroll, which your question was, are there incredible temple items, and there's going to be spiritual warfare, and there is spiritual warfare. We are experiencing it constantly. So the items, there's potential that there is the Tabernacle of Moses, the altar of incense, there's just altar of incense, that alone. But there's also a mention of the priestly breastplate that they wear. the breastplate of righteousness. It's mentioned to be buried in the same cave as all the items that I just mentioned. So that is huge. And if you don't think there's going to be spiritual warfare, we need to sit down and talk, because there is spiritual warfare happening. And as a matter of fact, just turn on the news, sit there for 5 minutes and listen to it. The spiritual warfare that we're experiencing around the world, I don't think this is a coincidence at all that it's happening. There's a great division that is happening around the world, the sheep from the goats, those that believe in God, those that don't believe in God. Those that believe in the security of Israel, those that don't. So this is all wrapped up in the same package. There's great possibilities of temple artifacts that are buried there at this location we're talking about tonight.
Now, the location that this points to, how close is it to Jerusalem? What's the significance of the burial location of these artifacts, or the possible location anyway?
Well, let me name the name. Let me name the location. The location where all these artifacts are buried is called Qumran.
Ah, okay.
It's really not there's really nothing significant about it if you just look at it. But when you begin to look at it from a biblical perspective, the place is incredible. And I'm going to tell you right up front, this place is the home of the prophets. It's the home of the Melchizedek order. It's the home, I promise you, that Jesus, Yeshua, John the Baptist, they were both there, I promise you. And if the Copper Scroll documents that support the Copper Scroll are correct, then there are two people, everyone in your all listening audience will know who they are. It's Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Edu, the prophet. They're named as actual people. There were 5 men that wrote the Copper Scroll. You can see 5 different handwritings on the thing. There were 5 men that wrote it, and 2 of them were surely prophets. So and then let me tell you another thing about Qumran that people didn't realize. I accidentally found it. I found out as I was looking for a map of Jerusalem at the time of Jeremiah, I found a map. And when I looked at the map, I thought, why in the world did these people draw Qumran upside down? It wasn't until after I sat there a second and I thought, oh my gosh, that's Jerusalem. And then I grabbed another picture of Qumran, the outline of Qumran, and they matched up incredibly well. So here's all the evidence now beginning to point to this place being more than just the archaeologists think it was a pottery factory. Well, it was. But it was also a place where they wrote scrolls. It was a place where they actually anointed prophets. It's going to be a huge, huge of importance to all of Israel and Christianity as well. It's going to be enormous. And whenever we take you guys to Qumran and you do your tour there, we're going to show you guys some really, really interesting things. And the people on your tour, I think, are going to love it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that even the organizers of our tour are going to love it. In fact, we got, as you know, a request from somebody in Israel who is apparently a friend of the organizer of the tour, who wants to join us for the day because he's fascinated and wants to find out more. Chris, we're talking with Chris Knight and Jim Barfield. Jim, the director of the Copper Scroll Project. You can find the website online, copperscrollproject.com, here on A View from the Bunker. Chris, what is the significance of the Tabernacle of Moses? If in fact it still exists and if in fact it's there, why would that be a significant find?
Oh, that would be huge. If the Tabernacle of Moses is where we suspect it is, from the documents of 2nd Maccabees, Baruch 2 and Baruch 4, we get these stories that Jeremiah took the Tabernacle of Moses and the Ark and some of the other items and hid them in a cave near Mount Nebo. Well, if the Tabernacle can come out, we already got priests over there who are already ready to go. They've been anointed. They've been set apart. And if that tabernacle were to come out and those items are there and they have the ashes of the red heifer ready, they could begin to consecrate these things, and they could go up to Gilgal or somewhere else and set this thing up and literally begin to start the sacrifices.
It's interesting that they've, we'll talk about this location here, because, again, the cave near Mount Nebo, which is mentioned in 2 Maccabees 2, which is one of the apocryphal books. It's still part of the Bible for some translations, the Roman Catholic Bible, but you can find it in the Apocrypha of the King James, the older King James translations. They found the location of the tabernacle, where the tabernacle stood, at Shiloh in the West Bank. A team from American Biblical Research, I think, Scott Stripling is the name of the archaeologist leading the dig. They've been excavating there, and they found where they believe the tabernacle stood for 369 years. So you've got the tabernacle there where they performed the sacrifices, and if they've got that location, well, okay, there's one spot where they could set it up, as another spot where they could possibly set it up. But how would this, if this is the case, then how would that affect the drive to build the third temple? I mean, we know that the Temple Institute has been working on architectural drawings, and all of the temple utensils have been recreated. How could they use the tabernacle instead of having to construct a physical temple on top of the Temple Mount?
Well, if the items are there that we think that are there, of course, the Copper Scroll itself doesn't actually list the Ark of the Covenant, but when you take all the surrounding documents, when you read the book that Shelley Neese wrote, she does such an amazing job of pulling all these documents together, and it helps tell the story of how the Ark and all that potentially is connected into this. But if all the items and the treasures are there, but those things come out, you possibly have the dowry also to Israel. Well, that's going to strengthen Israel's presence in the land, and it's going to empower the Jews to begin to organize and begin to push the final push, or whatever they need to begin the preparation or the building of the temple. If the Ark of the Covenant, let's just say on a whim that the Ark is actually there. We don't ever claim it's there. We don't run around and say we know it's there, because we don't know it's there. But there is a possibility that it could be a part of this stuff. And if the Ark of the Covenant comes out and it's a part of that, you might as well mark on your calendar that day, because history will change. When the Ark comes out, that more than likely is going to be the physical sign that the end of the exile has come to an end. The mercy that has been in the nations is coming out, and it's going back to Israel. And according to Revelations and different stories, a lot of stuff could start breaking loose. But those items will empower Jews. The Palestinians are already trying to go around and stamp out any history that Israel belongs to the land. There's a big push in Israel, through the heritage people, to build these locations around whenever they find an archaeological site or something. They like to build a monument so they can take the youth around Israel to make sure that they don't forget the Holocaust and that they own their inheritance. And if these things come out, it's going to root them deeper into the land, and it's going to empower them to build a temple. There's a lot of people who don't want the temple built. They just want everything to stay copacetic. But there's a lot that want it built. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jews as well as others who would prefer not to see that temple go up. Jim, the text in 2 Maccabees chapter 2 says, as you mentioned, that Jeremiah was headed towards Mount Nebo. Let's see, looking at the NRSV translation now of 2 Maccabees. It was in the same document that the prophet Jeremiah, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and the ark should follow with him, and that he went out to the mountain where Moses had gone up and seen the inheritance of God. That, of course, is Mount Nebo. Jeremiah came and found a cave dwelling, and he brought there the tent and the ark and the altar of incense. Then he sealed up the entrance. Some of those who followed him came up intending to mark the way, but could not find it. When Jeremiah learned of it, he rebuked them and declared, "The place shall remain unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. Then the Lord shall disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord in the cloud will appear, as they were shown in the case of Moses, and as Solomon asked that the place should be specially consecrated." Now, Nebo is on the other side of the Jordan River. That's in Jordan today.
Yes, it is.
So the opposite side of the Dead Sea from Qumran. So if, I guess my question is, how far can we trust the text here in 2 Maccabees? If it says that Jeremiah went to Nebo, how could these items be then at Qumran?
Well, it depends on how you translate that verse that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Because I looked it over and I tried to understand it, and I studied it in Greek because that portion is in Greek. And it also can be translated en route to Mount Nebo.
Ah, okay.
So if they were en route to, because if you take this shortcut from the Golden Gate, which is the main entrance to the Temple Mount, and you go straight to Qumran, you go straight to Qumran, and you kind of make a little elbow there, and you come out right there at Qumran, which is a much shorter route than going, like today you drive down Highway 1 till you get to Highway 90, then you go turn right and you go quite a distance and you get to Qumran. Well, if you take the shortcut, then you're going to you pass right by Qumran, you pass right by this area that we believe that the cave is at, and it's all right there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a probability, because the description on the Copper Scroll is almost identical to the description that you just gave about the cave, almost identical to it. And the first three locations on the Copper Scroll, location 1, 2, and 3, are in a straight line, with the location number 3 being the cave. Then when you look at locations number 53 through 57, they're in a straight line. And they end with 57 being the cave. So location 3 and 57 are the same spot. So why would they do that? And unless they were trying to put these items or be able to identify these items, over 2,400 years later. That's what is so fascinating about this, that they've got these clues that are there on the Copper Scroll. They're at Qumran. You've got all these locations at Qumran. The description on the Copper Scroll match the locations in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem and Qumran are like mirror images. Qumran is like a Jerusalem in the wilderness. So the possibility that they're the same location that they're talking about in 2nd Maccabees is very high. That is fascinating to me.
So Jeremiah, as he headed toward what would, again, be Jordan today, instead of going by way of Jericho, which would have been due east, went toward this community where texts suggest that Jeremiah was well known.
Exactly.
Now, why would he go there instead of heading, over to Mount Nebo to get this stuff as far away from Jerusalem, where Nebuchadnezzar's army was soon going to be, surrounding the city and breaking down the walls? Why would he go to Qumran instead of, let's get it out of, away from, as far from Jerusalem as possible?
Yeah, and you know what? Qumran had already been attacked. According to a book called Emek HaMelech, which means Valley of the King, it describes a battle that took place at Qumran, and if, in fact, I'm correct about this being the location. The battle took place at Qumran. They lost a lot of priests that were battling there to keep the items, all the treasury, because there was a treasury there, and you're going to see that on your tour. There was a treasury there that housed all of this gold and silver. They didn't drag all of this stuff from Jerusalem to Qumran. It was already there. The tabernacle, that's a different story. I believe that they did take it from Jerusalem to Qumran, but there was already had been attacked, and they were trying to secure all these items before they got attacked again, because it appears that they barely survived that attack. Matter of fact, Qumran is still in ruins from that attack.
Well, tell you what, we're going to take a break here because I want to ask about this. Sharon and I ran across a name today that pops up in the documents connected to Qumran, and that is the sons of Hakoz, mentioned in the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was writing some 140. It was written about 140 years after all of this took place around Jerusalem. What's the significance of Hakoz, Qumran? And when they built the second temple again, why didn't they, draw on these treasures? We'll ask more questions about this because it's fascinating and a mystery. And because of its location in the West Bank, there are some real political issues that we'll discuss as well as far as digging this out. We're talking with Jim Barfield and Chris Knight of the Copper Scroll Project. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.
The Ripper's dark deeds actually began long before 1888. And it wasn't a mere man who committed the crimes, but a demon in league with devilish men, a group of men called Red Wing. Only one small group of valiant men and women stand against this evil, a group that place their faith in Christ alone, and they protect a secret of blood that Red Wing hopes to use to usher in the reign of Antichrist and the end of day.
Red Wing is called Red Wing because they want to kill the church. They want to forever stop Christ from coming back. So it's the Holy Spirit, the dove, with a murdered, has been slain, a wounded dove. Ultimately, we still have to remember that the one who is in control is God Almighty, and we have to go to Him, and we have to suit up every time we go out.
The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert.
Book 1.
Blood Lies.
Book 2.
Blood Rights.
Book 3.
The Blood is the Life.
Book 4.
Realms of Stone.
And coming soon, Book 5.
Realms of Fire. Available at SkyWatchTVStore.com and paperback and Kindle at Amazon.com. Characters you'll love and a story you can't put down. The Red Wing Saga by Sharon K. Gilbert. Talking the Walk live every Sunday night. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, we continue a fascinating conversation that we started a few weeks ago on the connection between the modern UFO phenomenon and the Bible. No, angels are not ancient astronauts. That's just what they want you to think. The fallen ones. Ali Siadatan joins us next week on A View from the Bunker. That is March 10th. Make sure you're here at vftb.net. Now, tonight, we talk about something even more fascinating, I think, because it's tangible and may be accessible to us in the foreseeable future. We're talking with Jim Barfield, director of the Copper Scroll Project, and his colleague, Chris Knight. And we are... this mysterious copper scroll that was discovered in 1952 among the Dead Sea caves, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Jim, this cave that it points to, that may hold the high priest's breastplate, the altar of incense, the tabernacle, what kind of techniques, what kind of permissions, I guess I'm taking too many words to ask this question. How would we go about trying to verify that something's actually in that cave?
Well, the best way of all is to actually dig there and see if that we find a sealed wall made of masonry stone and plastered over. That would be our first indication that there's some very, very important items there. And the second way is do a scan Qumran and check to see if there's anything there with a very powerful metal detector, and do it under the authority of a politician, a man authorized to do it, because if I did it, it would not be kosher. But actually, Derek, we've done a scan of that location with a very powerful metal detector, and we got an incredible reading that there's non-ferrous metals under the ground there. And they in a straight line, there's 2 rows of them, and we only scanned a very small area. And the amounts of metal that to make a signal like we got on our computer printout, there would have to be massive amounts of non-ferrous metals, which are gold, silver, zinc.
So something not steel or iron, in other words.
No, not steel or iron.
Yeah.
So that is a huge clue that they're there. And also, we found other items there, like possibly plaster, and that plaster. We had it tested by 2 different, an expert in Israel and an expert company here in the United States, and they said that it was most likely man-made mortar. Now, why would man-made mortar be out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the Judean desert?
Well, that would seem to refer back to... I'm not sure what kind of noise we're getting there, but it sounds like somebody's being attacked by a very large cat. I mean, like...
Yeah, it's really loud, whatever it is.
The verse in 2 Maccabees talked about the cave being sealed up, so that might suggest the type of work one would do to seal a cave that's hiding stuff you wouldn't want found right away.
Right.
Well, now, Chris, let me toss you a question here. I'm curious that now, because, again, as Sharon and I have been doing our weekly Bible study, we're now into the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, which, of course, is the building of the Second Temple and the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. And lo and behold, it turns out that God is in favor of walls after all. Who knew? Why wouldn't Nehemiah and Ezra dip into this this treasure store, to pay for the reconstruction work that was going on in Jerusalem? Or did they? And we just don't know how much they might have left behind. Still there, Chris?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I was fixing my audio there, and I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, ask the question again, please, sir.
Oh, sure. Just wondered if they knew that these things were buried. This treasure was buried. This from the temple when the Jews returned to Jerusalem about 100. When did they get hauled out? About 130, 140 years later was when they were rebuilding the temple and then rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, which obviously was a big project, and you got to pay workers and you got to feed workers and so on. Why wouldn't they have dug this stuff back up then and then brought it back to Jerusalem?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. You know, the areas around Qumran, there's like 57 locations, and some of the areas around Qumran could have possibly been dug up. Some of those treasures, Haggai was a very young man when he went into exile, so when he came back, he would have easily known where these locations were at. They could have dug up some of these treasures and used some of that wealth to help build the wall. So the main area of our focus that we think has not been uncovered is the cave. And that cave potentially is like a cave of treasures, is a storehouse. We think that cave was probably built or known about many years before, and that the priests and Israel had been using that cave to store maybe even the wealth of kings. And so they already had this location. They already knew about it. And when Jeremiah did take these items out there, when he sealed it up, he said that these things would not be unsealed until the last days. Mm-hmm. Now, that's specifically talking about the cave. So at Qumran, there is a huge possibility that some of these locations could have been dug up, and some of that wealth could have been used during the time of Nehemiah to build the Zerubbabel temple and to restore the wall and help build Jerusalem.
Jim, you'd in the information that you shared with us, the interview that we did for SkyWatch TV, which will air on our network stations in a couple of weeks, you mentioned the sons of Hakkoz, and there's a reference to them in the documents that are pointed to a specific building there at Qumran. Who were they, and what was the significance of that building at Qumran?
Sons of Hakkoz, in Scripture, you'll see, if you look through Scripture, you'll see that the Hakkoz was the family that handled the treasury. And in fact, on the Copper Scroll, it names the family of Hakkoz, I believe, twice, and they talk about a particular building. They describe it in detail, the width of it. They talk about the building with the sloping walls. That's a building right there at Qumran, and it's a huge. The walls are incredibly thick. I'm going to say at least 12 feet thick. They taper up, and they form a truncated pyramid, but a pyramid with the top cut off. And that's the building they're talking about. And it's the walls are so thick, it would take a nuclear blast to even affect the doggone thing. It's just really huge. So the House of Hakkoz, they've been looking for it. They knew it was in the area of Jerusalem, well, not Jerusalem, but Jericho. I'm sorry, Jericho, and that they've been looking for it, but they didn't even think about Qumran being the location of it, but it is. And here's this treasury sitting out in the middle of nowhere. It's guarded by priests, and it's also guarded by men that have no interest in gold and silver. All they saw gold and silver as was kosher metal for the items of the tabernacle and the temple. And that's what that whole place was about, a place to guard that and to house what I believe was the Melchizedek order.
Let's talk about that. What is the Melchizedek order? We see a reference to that in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, describing Jesus as a high priest of the order of Melchizedek. Was there a Melchizedek order, or what was it?
Yes, there was a Melchizedek order. And think about it, Derek. When you read the book of Revelation, it talks about a priesthood being restored again that is not of the line of Levi. And you hear that in the book of Hebrews. They talk about it being restored at some point in the book of the Revelation, 12,000 from each tribe, which comes up to the 144,000. Guys, that's the Melchizedek order. That's what they're talking about. So whenever you look at the Melchizedek order, even it talks about it in a document from Qumran. It's called the Melchizedek Scroll. And that scroll gives incredible detail. It gives you the date of the crucifixion of Yeshua, of Jesus. It gives the date for it, and it's right on the money. It's an incredible thing. So the Melchizedek order at Qumran is not a stretch of the imagination whenever you start putting together all the clues. Here it is. It matches Jerusalem. Qumran is also all the water system. All the buildings there match Jerusalem. Well, not all the buildings, but all the main structures match Jerusalem, especially the outline. So for the Melchizedek order to actually be there would be huge, especially, and now think about this. If we open that cave, and inside that cave, if they hid documents just like they did around the open caves, how much better would the documents inside of that cave, how much better would they be? And what is the possibility, that there's a jar in there that contained the ashes of the red heifer? Because what they need to do is take those ashes, in order to start the Melchizedek order again, everything needs to be cleaned and refreshed. Because they have to have the ashes of the red heifer so that whenever the red heifer is found here, and I believe they may have one, and it's as prepared as it's supposed to be, they mix those ashes with the ashes from antiquity. That way, it's a never-ending cycle of a pure animal. So the Melchizedek order is huge, and it's possibly at Qumran.
Let's talk about that, Chris. This is something that sounds like the plot of a Hollywood film, a thriller. In fact, there was a miniseries on the USA Network here about 3-4 years ago called Dig that sort of explored these themes, and it began with a red heifer. I think they put this one in Norway, but as Jim mentioned, back in September, there was a news item that was published. Breaking Israel News and a few other news sites picked it up, that rabbis had certified that a perfect red heifer had been born. Now, we haven't seen any news items at all about this heifer since then. They've been very quiet about it. If, in fact, this turns out to be an animal that they can sacrifice, and this is according to their interpretation of Numbers chapter 19. It's not explicitly in the scripture as to why it's needed, but according to rabbinic tradition over the years, they need to use that in order to purify the site, purify the people, I believe. This is not something I'm an expert in, but it's required as a precursor, to prepare the ground, to prepare the way for the third temple. If that is found, and if the ashes, because it's got to be mixed with the ashes from the previous heifer, and they believe that only 10 will be born in all of history, and the 10th, there have been 9 so far, and that the 10th will be sacrificed by Messiah, if I remember correctly. I mean, again, what are the implications for this, both religious and politically, if this cave turns out to hold what the Copper Scroll suggests?
Well, I don't, like you, I don't fully understand all the red heifer. We know that if the ashes are in there, or if they do get a red heifer and they have the ability to cleanse these things and to establish these things, it's just going to be huge. Politically, gosh, to sit here and try to wrap our minds around, how big this would be, how political this would be. You got Palestine, who's going to try to do everything they can to shut this down, to nullify it, to say they're not real. You got probably the Roman Catholics are going to try to claim it for themselves. Obviously it belongs to Israel and the Jews. But if the items there, if the red heifer works out like Jim said, if there's ashes in there and they get a red heifer and they can combine these, and they can actually begin a process of establishing a sacrificial system. Ezekiel clearly says, if you read it from 40 to the end, that sacrifices are going to start up. Glory is going to enter the temple. There's going to be a temple built. Some think that temple is the new temple in the Zerubbabel temple, but we know it wasn't that temple because the glory has not been in any temple since Solomon's temple. It can't be the new heaven and new earth because it says there is no temple during that time, and there hasn't been a temple since Messiah. So the only place it can land, it looks like, is in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And for the red heifer and those ashes to be there, I think that would be a huge key item that would give them the release to begin to sanctify and to prepare these holy things to be reestablished, and for them to have the power or the influence they need to begin to set all this back up.
We're talking about the Copper Scroll with the director of the Copper Scroll Project, Jim Barfield, his colleague Chris Knight, joining us on A View from the Bunker. Jim, I need to ask this because this would seem to be a contradiction. So I'm sure you've heard this question, so I'm going to toss this to you and see how you respond. We talked about the verses in 2 Maccabees that indicate that Jeremiah took sacred items toward Mount Nebo, buried them in a cave somewhere, sealed it up, which included possibly the Ark of the Covenant. And yet in Jeremiah chapter 3 says that the Ark, in verses 16 and 17, won't be seen anymore. And I'm going to read the verses here just so I get I'm not relying on my memory here. When you've multiplied and been fruitful in the land, in those days, declares the Lord, they shall no more say, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. It shall not come to mind or be remembered or missed. It shall not be made again. So how do we reconcile that with the verses in 2 Maccabees?
That is a great question. I've had it asked a couple of times, not very many, but it is a great question. And I'll tell you this. I did an in-depth word study, and I wish I'd have known you were going to ask that question. I'd had my word study brought up.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I should have been ready.
But I knew people would ask me if I didn't ask, so I had to bring it up.
I got an answer if you want me to jump in.
Feel free, Chris.
Yeah, Jim and I did look into this. We were both curious because it comes up a lot.
Sure.
At whenever you're out teaching this stuff, and then of course the Ark, is potentially a part of this, so people get fascinated with that. Well, it's inevitable that Jeremiah 3 is going to come up, and it really bothered me for a long time too, because I was thinking, if Jeremiah 3 reads the way it reads, then we need to stop even trying to connect the Ark to this, because it basically says, or the way we thought it said, is that we're not going to remember it anymore. But when you read the passages and you read it very closely, it's the key is that when it says, it talks about them being in exile, and when they are in exile, it says that when they are in the land, in the last days, when they are back in the land, it says they will no longer say these things. So the flip side is, what were they saying when they were out of the land? When they were out of the land, they were saying that the Ark of the Covenant and all this would come to heart, it would come to mind, they could no longer ascend up to it. But when then they're in the land, it says they will no longer say those things. Why would they no longer say those things once they're in the land? Because if the Ark is there and the glory is there and everything is started back up, then they don't need to say those things because they're no longer in exile.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's exactly right. That it's implying that those things will not be said anymore, because he's right. The Ark of the Covenant hadn't been in the temple since the time of
Josiah.
Josiah, thank you. Yeah, Josiah was the last time they saw the Ark, and Jeremiah was there at the time. So when they bring it back and they set everything back up again, because they're going to be doing Sukkot and all these things are going to be done again. It says in Zechariah that if you don't do Sukkot, if we don't do Sukkot, as Christians, as Jews, it doesn't matter how you look at it, if we don't do Sukkot, he's going to have our water shut off. We're not going to get our rain as when we're supposed to do it. So the pilgrimage feast, undoubtedly, we're going to be doing again. That sounds like a strange thing. The ashes of the red heifer, that sounds like a strange thing, because to prepare the ashes of the red heifer, you become unclean. You have to be cleansed. Mm-hmm. Well, those ashes, like you were saying earlier, they have to be there. They are the cleansing agent that makes everything acceptable to the Lord for use again. So whenever you look at the Ark of the Covenant and the question you just asked, and which is a really good question, that you can, if you do a word study like I was talking about, that's what you find, that those words are not implying that it's not coming back again. It's that those words will not be said again, because we will have all the implements we need.
And the other thing that occurs to me is that even though the ark wasn't in the temple that had been rebuilt by Nehemiah, and again, I guess it kind of begs the question, when they came back to the land, why didn't they go back and get the ark and bring it into the temple when, after Zerubbabel had completed it, or at least after the walls had been built around Jerusalem again? But even without the ark, when Jesus went to the temple that had been expanded by Herod for his own glorification, really, Jesus still called it my Father's house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, why didn't they go get the ark? I think it's because the heart of the people has to be right. I mean, you hear that all the time in the Jewish culture, that the heart of the people has to be ready, has to be right, it has to be, and that's why I believe that they only got a little bit of, you were talking about the gold and silver at Qumran being used on Zerubbabel's temple. I think they took some of it, because there's a big gap in a spot where there was a lot of gold or silver. It's gone. You can see it on the test we did. Why didn't they use it all? Why didn't they build a massive temple and get it ready? I think it's because, and this is a kind of a cop-out answer, but it's the truth. The timing is not right. It's why the ark is not back. The timing is not right. It's going to be whenever this happens again. We are, guys, I believe we're incredibly close, or we're in the time of the millennial kingdom. I believe that with all my heart. Now we have to get everything in place, because there's a difficult time coming. We are in a very difficult time, and it's only going to get a little worse, but it's only going to be for a short time. And then we're going to have a Messiah, a righteous king ruling over us, and I can't wait, guys. I'm so tired of this craziness around the world.
Things are speeding up and getting faster, getting worse faster the last 10 years. Yeah. Either that, or we're just turning into grumpy old men, Jim. But I think I think things really are getting worse. Chris, let me toss this to you. We've got just about 10 minutes left, maybe a little less, and so let's kind of bring this into why this is significant to us today. What do you think? I mean, Jim kind of expressed his opinion as to where we are on the timeline. Where are we now? How close are we to needing these things? And what may have changed recently that would make these items, if they're there, more accessible to us? In other words, why do you think we can maybe get access to these now where we couldn't before?
Well, as far as the timing of all this stuff, when the trip first started and we began to go back and forth to Israel, that was a question that I began to pray about and ask. And I was like, Father, what is all this about? What's going on here? And, immediately what I got is that it's the third phase of the temple, and it's the time of the fullness of the Gentiles. And what I've always sensed is we've been going back and forth to Israel now 12 years, talking to rabbis, talking to the Sanhedrin, talking to Knesset members, visiting with scholars and hours of prayer and just being out at Qumran and going over the research.
Are y'all still there?
No, we're still here.
Okay. Yeah, the sense that I got over and over was we are in the transition of one age to another. And I feel like we're starting to come into this time of the fullness of the Gentiles, where the glory or the mercy that has been in the nations is going to start coming to an end, and the mercy is going to go back to Israel. Romans 11 talks about this, that this mercy that has been in the Gentiles will come to an end, and then he'll bring the mercy to Israel that all may come under mercy. And so even in Jeremiah 2, it says that these things will stay in the ground, in the earth, until the time of mercy. And that key word of mercy is key to understand in the understanding of the timing of all this. The Ark of the Covenant is the mercy seat. And if the Ark is in exile, then the mercy is in exile with the nations. And we know that in the history of Israel, the kingdom was split. The northern kingdom was sent into the Gentiles, and to this day, we really don't know who they are. But at the same time, not long after that, the Ark went into exile. So in a sense, you could almost say that if the Ark is in exile, then mercy is in exile with them. And then when that exile comes to an end, we enter this time of redemption. And then the Ark, if it does come out, that means mercy is coming out, and we're entering this new time of mercy for Israel.
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, basically God's throne on earth. More than once in the Old Testament, it describes Yahweh as enthroned above the cherubim, whose wings meet over the center of the Ark. Unlike the what was it, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the French archaeologist says it's a radio to talk to God. No, it's God's throne here on earth. But regardless of whether that is in the ground or not, Jim, what has to happen next, or what can people do next or pray for next in terms of the Copper Scroll Project, and what is your hope, your desire for the project, as you move it forward? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, one of the things I want to tell you is we don't want money. We're not looking for money. We're looking for prayers. We need your prayers, because that is what has made the Copper Scroll succeed to this point, and I'm not joking. But the prayers from the people that the doors that should be open are open, the doors that should be shut are shut, and we stay within the will of the Father the entire time, because we've got to be prepared spiritually. And that's a difficult thing to think about. I had a rabbi tell me, Jimmy, when you enter into that cave, he said, make sure that you don't think anything impure. And I said, great. I wish you hadn't have told me that. Now I'm going to be thinking, oh my gosh, what I think about. Seriously, think about that.
Yeah.
We have to be spiritually prepared. So the prayers of the people, that's the most important thing. And we are in the process of gathering leaders in Israel and here in the United States to join with us to visit with whoever the next prime minister is. Whoever is there, and then the date for the vote is on April the 9th. So when that day comes, we want to be ready with Knesset members and congressmen from here in the United States to talk with the prime minister, the new prime minister, or Netanyahu, whoever's in the seat, and tell them, let's go test it. For goodness sakes, it wouldn't take but 1 week. Actually, if they gave Chris and I a shovel, we could do it in about 2 hours. We'd know whether it's true or not. However, I want to test the cave first. That's where I want to dig first. And we would have to have preparation for that. We'd have to have planning for that, because if they're really there, this is not going to be your typical archaeological dig in Israel. This is going to be a massive recovery operation. And it's got to be done as much in secret as possible at that time. So that's what we need from the people more than anything, is their prayer and their, show love to our Israeli brothers, because they're the ones that's going to be handling it, not us. And everyone needs to understand that if this is going to be going to the Israelis, and God has got a purpose for that. So, an answer again, short answer, pray for us.
Well, that's kind of hard to remember. I mean, we've been so indoctrinated into looking for natural answers to all of our problems that even those of us who profess a faith in Jesus Christ tend to forget that, oh yeah, maybe that's our first line of defense. That's our strongest weapon, is going before the throne. It's fascinating stuff. And like I said, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this sounds like something from a Hollywood film. But it's playing out in real time before us. And Jim, we can't wait to get over to Israel, see you there in Qumran, And you and Shelley Neese, author of the Copper Scroll Project, the book, will be at the SkyWatch TV conference in early August. So hopefully we can help get the word out. And who knows what will happen between now and then.
That's true.
Yeah. Jim, Chris, God bless you, brothers. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight. And we, as you listeners, we direct you to the website, copperscrollproject.com, and we pray for you guys and for God's will to be done in this as in all things.
Thank you.
Coming up, we're going to talk about, our closing thoughts on this issue, but also on a couple of other stories for the week. The carbon footprint of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the church in Africa that's trying to walk back a miracle. Yeah, it's as weird as it sounds. That's straight ahead on A View from the Bunker.
Churches and educational establishments from universities down to elementary schools are embracing New Age philosophy and are being seduced by heavy demonic forces that are masquerading as angels of light, ascended masters, spirit guides, and even Jesus Christ himself. SkyWatch TV is proud to announce the second coming of the New Age official collection. When you order the new book, The Second Coming of the New Age by Stephen Bancars and Josh Peck, you'll receive the brand new DVD Beyond Supernatural, which includes never-before-released off-the-record interviews with the authors, detailing their long history of involvement with the New Age, and personal testimonies of their deliverance by Jesus Christ. And as a bonus, this DVD includes the entire SkyWatch TV 5-part series exposing the infiltration of the New Age. Plus, you'll also receive on DVD The Book of Enoch, Fallen Angels, and Ancient Aliens, an exclusive production with Dr. Michael Heiser regarding the blatant lies of ancient astronaut theory and the horrifying nature of fallen angels and alien abduction. Also included is the brand new audio series, Doctrines of Devils. Listen as Stephen Bancars interviews Doreen Virtue, world-renowned former best-selling author and teacher for the New Age, as she explains her incredible supernatural journey out of the occult and into the arms of Jesus. This over 12-hour series features bonus interviews with Dr. Chuck Missler, Dr. Thomas Horn, John McTernan, Gary Bates, and many more on the subjects of ghosts, demons, and the supernatural. But that's not all. You'll also receive the oversized, beautifully republished classic masterpiece in hardback, Myths and Legends of Babylonia and Assyria. This work provides not only the account of the mysteries of the ancients, but extracts and presents to the reader the occultism driving much of the New Age and heretical doctrines today. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $150. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. You can have access to everything you need to arm yourself against the onslaught of pervading spiritual darkness now. The Second Coming of the New Age official collection is available now at SkyWatchTVStore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
Shall we begin?
One man, one microphone, and a deep-seated psychological need to tell the world what he thinks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Next week, we talk UFOs and the Bible. Ali Siadatan. Join us from Canada, and that will be on March the 10th, 2019. Make sure you're here. Begins live every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. That's UTC-6. Important if you're listening from overseas, and we appreciate you listeners listening live on the other part of the world. It's amazing how this high technology, the internet, makes it possible to be globally syndicated. Sharon picked up on this really quickly. Back in 2006-07, when I had my midlife crisis, and had to go back into radio broadcasting. I'd been in broadcasting professionally, full-time secular radio, from the time I got into college in 1980, which Josh Peck reminds me was before he was born, until the early 90s. So for about 12, 13 years, I was in broadcasting professionally, worked a number of radio markets, music radio, disc jockey basically. But I'd always wanted to do talk radio. I mean, even when I was a little kid, and my normal friends listened to music radio at night, I'd be listening to late night talk shows. So 2006 and 7, managed to use audio from Sharon's and my podcast, PID Radio, used that to get a job in talk radio. Did that for about 18 months, which gave me some training on how to go about doing this. And she figured out pretty quickly that this new internet thing was a way to get the message out around the world without needing a transmitter or satellite. Took me a while to figure that out. As an old-time radio broadcaster, it seemed to me that you needed a studio, a transmitter, and a big antenna somewhere. And if you wanted to be syndicated around the globe or even just around the country, you needed a network or satellite or shortwave or something. She figured it out pretty quick. Sharon is the smart one in this relationship. So anyway, here we are doing this on Sunday evenings, and glad you're with us wherever you are and whenever you are, whether you're listening live or in the archives. The interesting thing about the Copper Scroll, and I know that there are those, including some folks that I highly respect, who dismiss the Copper Scroll as, I don't know, I won't say forgery. I mean, it's pretty clear that it's as old as the other scrolls that have been found at Qumran. But there are some idiosyncrasies with the text and so forth, and I'm not studied it enough to be able to speak to this intelligently. So let's just say it's not universally accepted as a guide to the buried treasures, for lack of a better term, from Solomon's temple. The bottom line is, when they start digging, I mean, at some point you're going to have to dig and figure out if there's actually something there or not. But if you've got scans of the area that are showing large deposits of non-ferrous metal, well, there's got to be something underneath the soil that's causing those pings back on this this device. It's the kind of thing that archaeologists. I don't know if you ever watched the show from BBC. Tony Robinson, who played Baldric on the old Blackadder series of the Rowan Atkinson, kind of an archaeology enthusiast. And so he was presenter on a show for years in England called Time Team. And they would go out to various sites and look for Anglo-Saxon and Viking and Roman artifacts and so forth all over the UK. And they would do what they called geophys. And they'd walk around with this big scanning device to look for anomalies under the soil. That's the kind of thing that Jim Barfield and his crew took out to Qumran. Something like that. And so they've got some sites that appear to have large deposits of non-ferrous metal under the soil. And if you come with us to Israel in May, it just happens Jim is going to be there. We learned this after we interviewed Shelley Neese, the author of the book about the Copper Scroll Project, which is cleverly titled The Copper Scroll Project. Shelley told us that Jim was going to be there leading a tour at the same time we're going to be there. And so we got in touch with Jim, and he's graciously agreed to take our tour through Qumran and show us the sites where these things may be buried. So if you come with us to Israel in May, and I know that we're getting kind of short notice now. I mean, it's April? We're less than 3 months away already. But we still got some room on the second bus. So if you're interested in more information and joining us there, follow the link at vftb.net. That'll take you to lipkintours.com. Aaron Lipkin and his crew will put together this tour. It's going to be an amazing tour. We got some great sites on this tour. Besides Qumran and seeing the location there possibly of these artifacts from Solomon's temple, we'll start in the north. We'll go to Tel Dan, where Jeroboam set up one of his golden calves. And I'll explain what that was about when we have an opportunity. I'm not sure if I can do it on site, but we will have some teachings along the way because a lot of what we'll see relates to research that Sharon and I have been doing for the last couple of years. Jeroboam's golden calf, I believe, was a reference to the creator god of the Canaanites, El. Not to be confused with El Elyon or El Shaddai, which are epithets nicknames, if you will, of Yahweh, the God of the Bible. The Canaanite creator God who was held court on Mount Hermon, which, by the way, is, it's like right next door to Dan, the city of Dan, was the site of the transfiguration of Jesus, not coincidentally. And the Grotto of Pan, we'll visit that. That's at the base of Mount Hermon. We will, of course, go on the Sea of Galilee. We'll go on the Jesus boat there, Danny Carmel and his boat. That was amazing, getting to do some worship on the Sea of Galilee. We'll do baptisms in the Jordan River. We will also see some wonderful archaeological sites. The site where the late archaeologist Adam Zertal believed the Canaanite general Sisera had his headquarters, his fortress, essentially, because the architecture of the site is very similar to the Nuragi, the towers that we saw on the island of Sardinia. And it's known that one of the groups that went marauding around the eastern Mediterranean during the time of the Judges, called the Shurden, probably came from Sardinia. But interestingly, there were connections in their, what appears to be their sacred sites, sacred wells and things devoted to a goddess called Tanit, who appears to have been Asherah, the consort of El. So interesting connections. We'll get into all of this stuff and the spiritual significance of it. We'll also see, as I mentioned, Qumran, Shiloh, Bethel, and we will also see another site found by Adam Zertal, what other archaeologists will admit is what they call a cult site, a site where worship took place, religious activities took place at what appears to be a large altar built from uncut stones on Mount Ebal. Now, if you read the book of Joshua, you'll find out that that's exactly where Joshua built his altar after the Israelites God destroyed Jericho, and the Israelites then defeated the people of Ai. They went north to the city of Shechem, to Mount Ebal and Mount Geritzim, the mountain of blessing and the mountain of curse, and built the altar on Mount Ebal. We will go there and see what Adam Zertal believed was the altar of Joshua. And it's really funny because other archaeologists will say, well, yeah, it's a cult site that dates to the early Iron Age. Well, duh, that's the time of the conquest of Canaan. Who else built an altar on that mountain at that period in time? Yeah, but they won't say it was Joshua and the Israelites. Well, anyway, we will see it. We'll see Jerusalem. We'll visit the Temple Institute and more. And again, lipkintours.com if you're interested. So, next week, as I mentioned, Ale Siadatan, looking forward to talking with him again. Conversation we had a few weeks ago was fascinating and got a lot of attention. He's got a lot of folks really interested in his work and his documentary film on the spiritual connection, the spiritual source, shall we say, of the modern UFO phenomenon. Speaking of video, Josh Peck does a lot of video work. Josh, our colleague at SkyWatch TV, brilliant young man, right now going through a real rough patch. Josh and Christina away from home at a hospital in Tennessee with their children because their 5-year-old son, Nathan, diagnosed with T-cell leukemia. So he's undergoing treatment. Haven't seen updates this week that indicate where he's at in terms of his treatment, but the attitude of Josh, of Christina, the pictures that we're seeing of Nathan show that everybody appears to have very high spirits. And that can be really difficult when you've got a child that age who's got such a tough road ahead. Doctors reportedly still very optimistic about his chances. But still, when you're a parent and you're seeing a child that age suffering, it's really hard. This is the kind of trial that leads skeptics to reject the idea that there can be a good God. When you see somebody young like this going through this kind of trial. So your prayers for Josh and Christina and for Nathan especially, Nathan Peck, much appreciated. And if you're led to help them out financially, you can do that through Josh's website, Josh Peck Disclosure, all one word, joshpeckdisclosure.com. There's a donate button in the top menu bar. And we sure appreciate that. couple of other news items as we kind of wrap up this evening. Russiagate kind of now going down in flames. We're supposed to see the final report from the Robert Mueller investigation. As we mentioned, the testimony of Michael Cohen, the president's former personal attorney, who's been disbarred for, lying to Congress, was kind of the, I guess, the last best hope of Democrats, never Trumpers, because they're not all Democrats, wanting to find the collusion that they've been looking for the last 2 years. And Cohen did not deliver what they wanted. And the big clue that he didn't deliver what they wanted is now that the narrative has shifted. Well, it was never really about collusion. It was about all this other stuff that, and we're going to see the Democrats ramping that up as we go forward. Just like what's going on in Israel with Prime Minister Netanyahu being indicted for bribery 6 weeks before an election. The Democrats are going to do the same thing with President Trump, I predict. I'm not a prophet, but it doesn't take one to call this one. They're not actually going to impeach the president. They're just going to keep that word in the public consciousness between now and November of 2020. But having said that, and I didn't watch this, but I've read enough reports about it that I think it's pretty clear that the president gave a really good performance in his speech to the CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Committee. It's basically a gathering of people who are really, politically active in the conservative movement in Washington. Gave a 2-hour speech pretty much off the cuff. And he just connects with voters in a way that nobody on the Democratic side does. So unless they can really come up with something that will hamstring him, Donald Trump is still the odds-on favorite to win re-election in 2020. Especially if elected Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez keep talking. I mean, Republicans, I think the best thing Republicans can hope for from AOC is that she just keeps talking. I mean, God bless her. She seems to be really sincere and probably really idealistic about the kinds of things that she hopes they can accomplish. But great googly moogly. I mean, when you're actually going on programs, even if you're speaking jokingly, to give the other party, the Republican Party, ammunition like she's done, talking about cow flatulence, and seriously considering that a threat to human survival on planet Earth. There are a lot of us out here, a lot of Democrats out there. They're like prime rib and hamburger. In fact, one of her top campaign officials does. There was a picture of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and one of her campaign staff out to dinner about a week or so ago that went viral on the web. Showed this fella eating, a big custom hamburger right across from this woman who had just given an interview saying we need to quit eating hamburger because cattle ranching is killing the earth. So, but the New York Post has taken that a step further, and they did an investigative piece on her carbon footprint. And apparently it's quite large. Which, she's an elected official, and so she's got to move people around. She's got staff that need to run errands and stuff. But instead of using public transportation, they're calling Uber and Lyft. And, those vehicles burn gasoline, usually. So, it's the whole Al Gore thing again, telling us that the inconvenient truth is that the Earth is going to die because of man-made global warming while living in a home that burns enough electricity to power an entire neighborhood. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez responded to the report in the New York Post by saying that she's just living in the world. And on Saturday night, she tweeted out, "I also fly and use air conditioning. Living in the world as it is isn't an argument against working towards a better future." Okay, I know you got to live in the world as it is, but it's also not really setting an example. And Republicans are certainly going to make some hay out of that. It also suggests that the people who are running on this Green New Deal idea really don't think that the restrictions under which we would have to live if we actually adopted this Green New Deal would apply to them. Well, we'll see. I just don't see any way that Green New Deal ever goes anywhere. It's just a campaign promise. But I think there are enough people living in America, voters whose livelihood, when they start thinking about it, really depend on using the most cost-effective fuel available for heating their homes and powering their vehicles, especially farmers. For them, the Green New Deal is just going to be a non-starter. Saw something that caught my attention the other day from another one of this freshman class of Democratic representatives, Ilhan Omar. She's the Democratic congresswoman from Minnesota, Somali in origin, and she is, of course, Muslim. Apparently visited a group in Honduras, an anti-American group there, and talked about dismantling the patriarchy. She's part of a delegation to Honduras in 2017, organized by a group called Witness for Peace, which is affiliated with activists who really oppose America, Israel, capitalism, and democracy, and apparently the patriarchy. She discussed her intersectional feminism. That's a term I keep seeing lately, intersectional. It's one of those that I think doesn't really mean anything. You just kind of pour into it whatever you want it to mean. But I just had to, SMH, shake my head. Dismantling the patriarchy. I mean, Representative Omar does realize that she's a Muslim, right? I mean, you don't get more patriarchal than Islam. So, again, one of those things where you just realize they are just saying what they want their progressive base to hear, and there's no way they can possibly really mean it. News story from the UK. This is from one of the red tops, the Mirror. A born a woman, living as a man now, 33 years old, goes by the name Jareth Nebula. Not her real name. She has realized apparently that having the gender reassignment surgery didn't solve her problems. And so now has decided that she wants to be accepted in human society as a non-human, an alien, in fact. Has gone to the extreme of having her nipples removed and shaves her eyebrows to make her feel less human. The pronoun chosen by the Mirror, by the way, is male, but I mean, biologically, she's female. And so she can call herself whatever she wants. I'll use whatever stage name, whatever, professional name she wants to use, but I'm sorry. I'm going to use her correct gender. And she can call herself genderless and an alien if she wants, but sadly, the media, once again, another example of catering to somebody's mental and emotional issues rather than saying, okay, this is somebody who actually needs counseling. And sadly, another example of a ministry playing on the gullibility of parishioners. This is coming out of South Africa, where it's reported that a couple of funeral homes, mortuaries, funeral directors are suing a ministry there because a self-declared prophet who claims to have raised somebody from the dead kind of tricked them into being participants in this event. They didn't want to be a part of this, but their names were used in order to give some credibility to this man who was brought to this service, this meeting, whatever, and making it appear as though he was genuinely dead. Pastor Alf Lukau, in the video that went viral, shown shouting, rise up," to this man in the coffin, who then sits up and takes a deep breath, and of course the crowd around him shouting hallelujah and praise the Lord and so forth. Again, these funeral directors suing the ministry, and the ministry now, which is, and I had the name here, and of course now I can't find it. Well, anyway, Pastor Lukau's ministry is now walking back the claim that the man was dead when he came to this meeting. They're saying now that, he was... that the pastor just completed a miracle that God had already begun. Alleluia International Ministries, the name of his ministry. They said the dead man was okay. He was only partly dead when he came back, and then the pastor then just completed the miracle. Apparently not wanting to go into a court of law and prove that the man was actually dead when he was brought to the meeting. Is there a status on a that a medical official would say undead on arrival? Because that appears to be the case here. It would be funny if people weren't taken in by it. But as the Epistle of James writes, those who presume to teach and preach have a higher standard that they have to meet. That we have to meet. I mean, me opening my mouth into this microphone, on Sunday nights. Sharon and I with our Bible study and, books that I write and so forth. We'll be held accountable. And so we try to make sure that we get the information right and not make claims that aren't true. God does not need us to fake miracles to prove his power. He can do that on his own. I mean, genuine miracles. God doesn't fake miracles. He doesn't do things just for special effect either. There's always a purpose. Sometimes it's not when we want it. He answers our prayers. It may not be what we want, but it's what we need. He is not a genie in a bottle to be summoned on command. And that's the danger of ministries like this Pastor Lukau. Because when God doesn't answer on command, then we think, there's something wrong with us, or we reject him altogether. The older I get, the more convinced I am that the majority of people who haven't accepted Jesus Christ have not rejected Jesus himself. They've rejected people who claim to follow Jesus Christ, or who do follow Jesus Christ. Being human, we often get in the way, make ourselves a stumbling block between the gospel and the people who need it. Coming up again next week, LAC at 10. Then in the weeks following, Richard Blaze on March 17th. He is the producer of a documentary film. We've interviewed him before, bringing him back now because the film is now more widely available. It's called Human Weeds, about the modern eugenics movement. That's March 17th. And then March 24th, one of the featured speakers that we will finally meet face-to-face when we get to Dallas, the Hear the Watchman Conference. Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. He'll be here on March 24th, and looking forward to that. The conference, by the way, in Dallas, the Hear the Watchman Conference, 98% sold out, we are told. Only a few spots left, so if you're going to be in or around Dallas at the end of March, would like to join us for the conference and see Gary Wayne, L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, Pastor Carl Gallups, Pastor Paul Begley, Rabbi Zev Porat, Casper McLeod, Dave Daubenmeier, more. Sharon and I will be there. Stephen Bankars, Josh Peck's co-author of The Second Coming of the New Age. Well, act quickly. We can still save you $20 off the registration using the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20. If you can't be there, but you want to see the presentations, well, there's streaming video. Take advantage of that. Use the promo code Gilbert20, and you get 20% off the streaming video cost. And again, you do that at hearthewatchmen.com. SkyWatch TV's first annual Defender Conference coming up August 2nd through 4th. That is sold out. Tom Horn, Mike Heiser, Carl Gallups, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Dr. Michael Lake, Shelley Neese, and Jim Barfield, The Copper Scroll Project, and music by Dino Kartsanakis. That and more. Streaming video details coming very, very soon. We'll have that for you this week. And then October 4th through 6th, Sharon and I proud to join L.A. Marzulli, Russ Dizdar, Carl Gallups, Jim Barfield, Bill Salas, and more for the Unsealed Scroll Prophecy Conference. This will be at the Grand Hyatt San Antonio. Again, this is October 4th through 6th. Promo code Gilbert20, Gilbert20. Get you 20% off the registration for that. You'll find that at unsealedscroll.org. A View from the Bunker, a production of Gilbert House, released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our opening theme is by Kevin MacLeod. Incompetech.com is website. Our opening announcer, DC Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Thanks for listening. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.